In this video, I'm going to replace the PCB panel, motor, and circuit board on a Behmor 1600 Plus roaster. This also applies to the two-piece upgrade kit for the Behmor 1600 AB Plus, though you won't be replacing the motor, so you can skip over that portion of this video. All three components come with our upgrade kit that can be found on our website. The improved features include an updated processor with more memory and a shorter refresh time, an audible beep that alerts you when the safety feature kicks in, and a new motor that allows for better control of drum speed during the roast cycle. Swapping out these pieces is a fairly simple task, and the only tools you're going to need are a short and long Phillips head screwdrivers, needle nose pliers, and wire cutters. It's also handy to have a small flathead screwdriver for removing some of the wire clips, which you'll see in a few minutes. Before we begin though, make sure to unplug your roaster now. First, take off the right side panel by removing the 3 screws in the back and 3 screws underneath that secure it to the roaster. Once the screws are out, slide the panel toward the front of the roaster to release the set clips and then pull away. You'll need to disconnect the DC fan plug from the circuit board in order to remove the side panel completely. Press the tab on the plug clip and gently pull it from the plug outlet. It's a good idea to keep the screws with each piece for when you reassemble your roaster. Now remove the left-hand side panel, which has an extra screw on the inside of the door frame. Take note that this screw is smaller than the other 6. Again, slide the panel forward to release the set clips and pull away, making sure to not bend the tabs in the process. Next, we will remove the top panel of the Behmor by first unscrewing the 4 screws on the top of the door frame. Your short screwdriver will work well to access this tight space. Now remove the 4 screws that secure the top panel to the back of the Behmor. These screws are different than the ones up front and should not be mixed up when you remount the top panel. You need to bend a single tab on the right side of the top panel in order to remove it. Grab your needle nose pliers and bend the tab down until it is horizontal to the slot that it passes through. Now remove the top panel by first swinging the left side out, then carefully wiggling the tab that you bent through the slot on the right side until it swings free. It's a good idea to take a photo of the PCB all wired up to have on hand when we need to cross-reference wire colors and connections against the new wiring diagrams later on. We can now remove the old Behmor control panel. And first you're going to have to unplug the flat ribbon plug and power clip from the circuit board. Check the wiring diagram in the instruction manual that we've linked in the video description below if you're unsure which cables to remove. Next we'll remove the 5 screws that hold in the panel. Take note of the alignment of the small plastic tab at the bottom of the panel for when you install a new panel. It should be close to centered. The long screwdriver makes this job easier, as does a magnetic tip in case you drop a screw. My screwdriver has a 6-inch driver, which is still just shy of reaching the screws along the bottom of the panel without having to squeeze the handle into the tight space. Once removed, keep the screw set with the panel so you don't misplace them or mix them up. Also, take note of the hinge pin that slides into the slot on the left side of the front panel. Now you can remove the rest of the connectors from the circuit board and clip the cable ties in preparation to remove it. The Spade connectors have a little tab holding the clip to the male adapter on the PCB. A small screwdriver helps with raising the tab in order to remove the clips. Some of them are covered in heat shrink, which makes it a little tricky. Never try to force the clips from their connectors, and doing so could damage the PCB. Now remove the 4 screws holding the PCB in place and pull it completely from the roaster. I had to wait to pull one final spade clip until I removed the board from the roaster, allowing me to get a better angle with my screwdriver. Now we can remove the old motor if you're upgrading a 1600 model. Open the roaster door to access the 2 screws that hold the motor in place. Make sure to keep track of the tension washers for when you mount the new motor. After removing the screws, turn the motor cylinder about 45 degrees so the motor brackets clear the axis space when pulling from the roaster. Install the new motor by inserting with the brackets at an angle, just as you removed it, lining up the holes on the motor mounting bracket with the holes in the sidewall. Hold the motor with your right hand while you tighten down the screws and tension washers with the other. Test the fit of the drum before moving to the next step. Before we mount the new power PCB, we need to install the 2 Spade adapters that come with the kit. Each adapter is secured with a single screw and tension washer. The single connector goes to the connection labeled ACL. The one with 2 connectors goes to the connection labeled ACN. Make sure the ACL connector is angled to roughly the 2 o'clock position. Since some of the wires are short, I use the foam insert that the control panel ships in to raise my PCB board up off the table. Now you can start connecting the wires to the new PCB board, following the diagram laid out in the instruction guide. I found it handy to have the photo we took of the old PCB on hand to cross-reference wires of similar color. Once the wires are in place, connect the new control panel cables to the PCB and run a test by holding the start button while plugging in the roaster. The test takes about a minute and will run a series of calibration and systems checks. I'll let it run in its entirety in this clip only. If you receive an error message, check all the wiring to make sure it matches the diagram and then perform the test again. Go ahead and screw in the 4 screws that hold the PCB board in place and clean up the wiring with cable ties as best you can. I zip tied the 3 wires that are no longer in use and tucked them out of the way in the back of the roaster. Install the new control panel by first sliding onto the roller pin and lining up the plastic mounting tab. Make sure the tab is centered in the slot as before. Fasten the top screw to hold the panel in place before testing the panel functions. Plug the panel into the PCB and plug the roaster into a power outlet. Press the 1/4, 1/2, and full pound roast weight buttons as well as all the profile buttons to make sure the proper times are displayed. Make sure the light comes on and that the motor engages by pressing the cool button. Unplug your roaster. Now run the systems checks again by holding the start button while plugging in the roaster. Secure the new control panel with the 4 remaining screws. Before moving on, make sure the space between the door and the control panel is even from top to bottom. If it looks off, remove the screws and realign. Put the panels back on the Behmor in reverse order, starting with the top. Start with the right side clip and then push the left side in until it sits flush with the door. Screw the front 4 screws into the top panel. Now pull the control panel forward slightly until it's flush with the door and bend the tab to hold it in place. Screw in the remaining 4 screws to secure the top panel completely. Reinstall the left side panel by inserting the tabs into the slots that help secure it in place and pushing the panel toward the back of the roaster. Fasten the 3 screws at the back of the panel and then tilt the Behmor on its back to secure the 3 screws underneath. Don't forget that 7th screw on the inside of the roast chamber. Before securing the right side panel, plug the DC fan into the PCB board. I found that I needed to pull the fan wiring out from the housing in order for the cable to stretch far enough to reach the outlet when the panel is installed. Hold the D button and plug the roaster into a power outlet. The LED should display 120. Unplug the roaster and run one last system check by holding the start button while plugging it back into the wall outlet. The installation is complete and you should be ready to go. Load the drum into the roast chamber and start a roast cycle to make sure the heating elements come up. If you get an error message on startup or a temperature reading of 32 degrees Fahrenheit on sensor A, check sensor connections 1, 2, and 3 and make sure they're wired correctly. Put the roaster in manual mode by pressing P5. Test the variable drum speed by pressing D, and the temperature sensors B and A. Congratulations, you're now ready to roast your first batch of coffee on your newly upgraded Behmor 1600.